What's up, everybody? Marvel Across 316 back on another comic book flashback. Today we are looking at the Ultimate Spider-Man issue number 11, and today's title is Discovery here. And man, what a cover! I love that cover here. I just love every cover so far of this series in the Ultimate Spider-Man comics. And so let's go ahead now and continue the story. We recall how Spider-Man had basically gotten his butt kicked by Electro and Kingpin. He was thrown out of the Fisk Tower. Even Spider-Man's mask was taken off. I mean, it was a pretty humble but also humiliating defeat of Spider-Man that we just witnessed 2 issues ago. And now we're going to see what Peter Parker is going to do as he continues to do some research on the Kingpin. He really wants to bring Kingpin down. That's the main thing that we need to understand as we continue this storyline here, is that Peter Parker knows that the Kingpin is a menace to society. He has this whole secretive, basically crime going on, like this organization of crime going on with Kingpin, and he just wants to take him down. And so he's just thinking about that big fight. He's thinking about Electro especially, and he's like, who was Electro? Was he like a mutant or something? And he's still trying to recover from that beating. He even had to break the date with Mary Jane Watson, and we see how last issue that she's pretty mad at Peter Parker for breaking that as well. So what Peter Parker decides to do is he's going to create this email account, this fake email account, and it's so funny here that he uses the name Arthur Simek here. And if you know anything about the old comics, especially the ones I've been reviewing here lately on my channel, especially with just, the Amazing Spider-Man series, Artie Simek is another name for Arthur Simek, and basically Arthur Simek was the letterer of the old comics, and so this is the name that they're going to use, or basically what Peter Parker is going to use in this fake email account, as he is basically wanting to get in touch with Mr. Fisk Towers here, the Mr. Fisk who's been using all these different kind of cameras and stuff like that. So he basically wants to get some surveillance cameras and figure out exactly what kind of surveillance cameras is Kingpin using. So he's like, oh crap, I need to get to English. English Lit just started 5 minutes ago. So he rushes out of the library, and then when he gets to English Lit class, they tell him he needs to go see a Mrs. Dr. Bradley here. And we're going to figure out who the heck is Dr. Bradley. And so she tells Peter Parker to just sit down. They're in this empty room here. And so what she starts to do is she just starts to ask Peter Parker a lot of questions about that incident that took place a few issues ago with Spider-Man and the Green Goblin. Remember how the Green Goblin attacked Spider-Man right within the school, and I mean caused a lot of damage. And now reports have been shown that Peter Parker was actually hiding out in the restroom. But really, what they don't know is that Peter Parker was actually dressed as Spider-Man fighting the Green Goblin. But, of course, Dr. Bradley doesn't know anything about that. And so we see here that she continues to ask him questions, and she basically says, like, how do you know Harry Osborn? And they're like, oh, we were good friends. And also, like, who was that creature? And then, of course, Peter Parker says that was Norman Osborn. And then Peter Parker basically says, oh, yeah, Harry's not here anymore. He's now in Colorado with his uncle. So we learned a few things about the whereabouts of Harry Osborn. And we're still not too sure what happened to the Green Goblin. I know he was defeated a few issues ago, but we still don't know exactly if he's dead or not. And so as it just continues to go, Peter Parker's like, what is this all for? I mean, I just don't understand. And so I'm just trying to help. I'm just seeing if you have any trauma going on in your life. And then she even brings up Uncle Ben. And he's like, you know what? I think I'm going to get ready to just go. I need to get out of here. So he comes up with an excuse and he basically says, I mean, if I don't want to, does this affect my grades in any? And she said, oh, no, no, you can go if you like. And so he says, then you know what? I think I'm going to go. I have lots of stuff to do. And so he walks out, and then in the hallway he comes across Liz Allen, and Liz Allen is actually kind of looks like she's depressed in a way. Don't know exactly why, and then she looks right here. Maybe that's the reason. And so now she's going to be the next one to see Dr. Bradley. And Peter Parker's actually feeling kind of, in a way, disappointed or just kind of worried for Liz Allen and her health. I don't know why. But he's just kind of worried about that. Exactly. What was that meeting all about exactly? Then he realizes, hey, why don't I go back to the library real quick and check the emails? He checks the email. No mail. He says, nuts. And then he looks at the clock. Oh, dang, fourth period already started. And so we see here that everybody is, when he gets to the hallway, they're at their lockers. He comes across Mary Jane, Kong, and Flash Thompson are talking about Keanu Reeves movies. And so Mary Jane seems to still be mad at Peter Parker about breaking that date. And he's basically said, Mary, and she's like, what? And then she just leaves. And he's like, well, don't be mad forever. And so Mary Jane's still mad at Peter Parker. And so Peter Parker, after school, gets back to his house. We see here that he's actually been designing more masks for his costume here, so that's pretty cool. He has exactly 3 masks now, so that's good. Then he gets on his computer and it says that you've got mail, and this is the funniest thing too. Sam Rosen, another person that used to work for Marvel here, he was also worked for the lettering page as well back in the 60s and 70s. Pretty cool stuff. Love how Marvel sneaks these names in here. And so basically Peter Parker got the email back, and we see here that it's from Fortune 500 companies, like it's a 4566 telex system. That's what the Kingpin uses. We see that Peter Parker then watches this whole presentation here by Patsy Walker. And I mean, just up-to-date modern technology here. This presentation shows that it creates these DVDs that burn DVD disc for you. You get the highest kind of security system available. And Peter Parker's, you know what? I need to get my hands on this. And I need to go back to Fisk Tower. And he recalls just a little bit of a flashback from 2 issues ago of how Peter Parker as Spider-Man was unmasked by the Kingpin and then thrown out of that window. And then we saw the murder of Mr. Big here, who was, as we saw, part of Kingpin's crime organization. And so we see that Peter Parker suits up as the Ultimate Spider-Man, and Ultimate Spider-Man now is going to pay a visit to Fisk Tower. And so Kingpin is still questioning his men, questioning Electro and these other guys about the whereabouts of Spider-Man. Were they sure enough to check the grounds here to see if Spider-Man in fact died? And they're also talking about something about like this guy called these news stations saying, do not report Kingpin as the Kingpin of crime or anything of that nature, or we're going to come after you. And so we see that Spider-Man is still on the mind of the Kingpin. Spider-Man sneaks into the Fisk Tower. He's going to go to the surveillance area where everything's taking place, and he's going to then take down one of the security guards here. And Spider-Man's main job right now is to get his hands on those DVD discs so he can come across some more proof that the Kingpin, Wilson Fisk, is in fact up to no good. And so there's a big gunfire going off, a bunch of things start to sis out, and Electro's continuing to reaffirm with Kingpin that he has everything covered here. and then the power goes out right in the middle of their conversation. Kingpin looks pissed, and then we see that the enforcers are having a conversation here about the murder of Mr. Big. Mr. Big used to be their boss, but Mr. Big also owed them money. So we see here that Dan's trying to, help Ox here because Ox feels like they betrayed Mr. Big. All of a sudden, they get a phone call from Wilson Fisk that there is a security threat and that it's most likely Spider-Man. And so we see that Spider-Man breaks the door, and yes, he comes across what he's been looking for, these DVD discs here. So he starts putting them into his book bag here, and all of a sudden we see a crackle, and we know exactly who that's from. It's from Electro. And then we see a rope. Of course, that is from, Montana. So now we're going to deal with what's going to happen next issue as Spider-Man is caught here with not only 1, 2, but 4 supervillains. We had the Enforcers and Electro now with Spider-Man in their grasp. What's going to happen next issue as we look at issue number 12? I hope to see you there. And until next time, keep reading comics.